everyone always talks about how the transition to work is helpful, right? And no one ever talks about the transition back home, or at least very few people talk about the transition back home. And that's critical, because if we are working from home and we have the kind of job where it's like, go do this, go do that, and it's very like, I'm the boss or I'm in charge, or I make rapid, fast decisions and I have to be very sort of commanding, you got to be able to let go of some of that before you transition back home, because otherwise you're going to talk to your spouse and your kids in a very like demanding, bossy way. And that is not a good thing. Like, especially in COVID, when we're all stuck in a house together, if you're sort of rubbing people the wrong way because you can do that at work, but you can't really do it at home because you need to be caring and kind, like you should be at work too, but maybe you're not. If you don't take time to transition back to dad or mom mode, it's gonna maybe not work as well. So pay attention to that reverse transition too.
ADHD Rewired, episode 330. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here with our live Q&A. This is recorded on June 9th. We are here with the usual crew. We got William Curb. Hey, Will.
Hey there. Good to be here.
Good to see you. Glad to have you here. Will Curb from Hacking Your ADHD. And we got Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials.
How's it going?
Going awesome. It's going awesome. We are still here in the thick of COVID. The world is weird and the world is on fire, and but we're hopefully here to provide a little bit of help and support and maybe a little bit of humor along the way, because not everything sucks in the world right now.
Nope.
So y'all can't see, but Brendan is he had something happened. Not quite sure what. Will want to take some like bets on what do you think happened?
I bet he heard something in his house fall over, and he's exploring what his kids have done.
My guess was that too. He's back. Brendan, we made a bet on what the issue was. What was the issue?
My kids were being a little too loud. I had to chase them away.
All right. Very good. All right.
They're usually really good at it, at not being noisy. They're really amazing. I even have a flag that says, "Shh, Dad's recording," that I put on our daily schedule.
Awesome. All right. Well, Ella has a question. So Ella, why don't you share with us your question?
Oh, do you want me to ask it?
Yeah.
I don't remember what I wrote in the Q&A.
All right. Well, it's still there. We can help you out. Will, do you want to read it?
Yeah, sure. It's, how do I avoid doing something that pops up, like answering an email when I'm supposed to be doing something else, or it will make me late?
I love this question. Alan Brown from ADD Crusher has a great approach to this. He calls it, that's BS, and I'm not doing BS right now. So anything that is not the thing that you are wanting to do, he just calls it BS, right? So one, I think it's great that you have this sort of awareness of that you get, something pops up. So there's the sort of the mental, how do we think about these things approach. There's also the environmental approach. How do we actually minimize and reduce the number of things popping up? I was talking with my alumni during our alumni session today. I have this weird thing going on my phone right now where I get a chime, a ding. But it's like a ghost. There's nothing is telling me where this ding is coming from. There is no notification, like words anywhere. Because I have my notifications pretty locked down because I, like you, get easily distracted, right? So are there things that you can do that could actually minimize those things popping up?
Well, I just had to say that the ridiculous thing was 2 days ago, the invitation to the webinar came on the screen. And I was like, I'm definitely doing something else, or I was going to be totally late. And I said, okay, here I am answering the email about the ADHD webinar, which is like a total demonstration of the situation. I think, of course, it would be to have the discipline to have the email and various things turned off and to say, I have, a certain amount of time that I'm going to look at these things, and I have to believe that no emergency is happening.
I love how meta that is, getting distracted and pulled away by something related to something that could help you around your ADHD. Will, what do you do to avoid or deal with those things that pop up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think an important word there that Ella mentioned was discipline, which I've tried to stop relying on discipline as a very poor method with ADHD, being like, I just won't do that. As a strategy, it almost never works for me. Discipline only works in the sense of like, okay, I'm going to have coffee in the morning. I'm a disciplined coffee drinker. But for like preventing myself from doing things that doesn't work. So at least for me. And so it's like, if I want to not do something, I have to make sure I create something in my environment so that I can't get distracted. Since I'm like back at my office now, I want to make sure that I'm not doing stuff I'm not supposed to be doing on my computer, like opening games and stuff. So I have a program on my computer called Freedom. It blocks me from even doing it. I technically could get around it if I really wanted to, but just having a little bit of resistance in the beginning reminds me to stay on track. And so, yeah, environmental modification, I think, is the best thing, where you just prevent yourself from seeing the distractions or accessing them.
Brandon, what about you?
One of the things that helps me, it's sort of environmental, is having a plan, right? Like if you don't have a plan for when you're going to check your email during the day, then you're going to check your email whenever it comes up, because you can't kick it to some other point in the day. But if you have a plan where like you check your email at, I don't know, let's say you check it at like 9 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. or something, anything that comes up between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., you're like, that is a thing that I can do at 6 o'clock when I get to checking my email time again. For things in general, if you have a plan for what to do with it, it becomes easier to do because you're not like improving the whole time. So that might be another helpful strategy. And you can pick what time those emails are. I'm not saying 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. because those are awful times for lots and lots of people. But having an idea for where that BS is going to go is helpful.
Oh, is that helpful for you?
Yeah, very helpful what Will said about discipline, because that then leaves me always feeling that I've effed up. And, I'm just like, whatever, So I think that that's very helpful, in which case I'd almost have to live in a padded cell if I was going to have an environment that didn't distract me.
It's something I've done with clients that you can have a friend do.
This isn't like clients in a padded cell.
No. I just mean this isn't like a hire an ADHD coach for this particular strategy. You can have a friend do it. I have a client who like will check her email at like 11 o'clock at night when she should be going to bed and that kind of stuff. So at random intervals for like 2 months, I think I scheduled emails to send to her at like 11:03 and midnight and stuff, to train her to ignore those late night emails that she wanted to ignore. Because they all of mine were dumb and useless. Like they didn't matter, but it was a reminder for her that she didn't have to check the other ones either. So having a friend who would be willing to do that, it took me, 5 or 10 minutes to schedule out a bunch of emails. And then I didn't have to think about it anymore.
Cool. All right, let's go. We have another question. Let's go to Karen's question. And Brendan, would you mind reading Karen's question? I'm going to pull her up because she said she is willing to go live.
Sure. I have a question about the pluses and minuses regarding working from home versus working in an office.
All right, Karen, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
Doing good. All right. Pluses or minuses from working from home or your office?
Yeah. We've been working from home. We're a small company during the pandemic. And I've noticed some pluses and minuses from that. And we're now, as a small company, deciding, do we want to go back to the office? Do we want to use an office like 1 day a week? And I'm really torn and would love some input or some ways to think about, if I am working at home more, the structures around it, I've been approaching it like it's a temporary situation, and now looking at it could be something more permanent, and I have some hesitation.
Okay. How many people are on your team?
3.
Okay. Have you asked them?
Have I asked them what?
If they would prefer to work from home or at the office?
Well, it's a discussion we're just starting to have. We're saying, well, we want to get together next week and talk about it. So I thought I'd come here to get some input or just some ways to think about it.
Well, and the reason I sort of asked it that as a follow-up question, because I think that everybody is different, right? I think some people can rock it working at home, just love it. Some people, like, it's a nightmare trying to work from home. And I'm guessing that for some of us, it's awesome for a little while, then it becomes awful. So I think that everyone's experience is going to be a bit different about it. I do think that there is certainly a social, cultural value of getting together at the office. And that's, I think that is valuable. I guess part of my thinking around this too is like, if businesses are able to see that, we actually can function remotely, doesn't necessarily mean that going completely remotely is the best option. But what it does mean is that businesses can allow for more flexibility with their workers, right? So if like there's something that comes up, or they need to maybe be at home for a day or two here and there, while they're still working, to me, that just makes more sense. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of changes and especially in service-based, businesses, on how people kind of work. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very personal thing because, so I was mentioning at the beginning, I'm finally back at my office after, and it's because I have kids at home. That's very different than when I was working at home and didn't have kids at home, because you have that built-in distraction. And because I would love to work from home and not have to commute and pay for an office and all that, but it just doesn't work as well for me. And one of the benefits I found from working, up, the commute is actually great for priming me to get into work mode. It's like a 10-minute drive for me. So that can be worked around if you start your day with some sort of routine to get you into work mode. But the other really nice thing is it gives me a time I can stop work. I don't do a lot of work from home now. And so when I first was working from home, I would be like, oh, it's 8:00. I can pound out some more of these things I need to do. And it's just like, oh, if you can set up rules to make sure that you're not working at night, that's great. But if you're working from an office, it makes it easy to be like, well, this is when I stop and I'll just come back to it tomorrow.
So Will, are you saying for you that you found it easier to stop when you were working at home?
Oh, easier to stop when I was working from an office.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it's really interesting because I'm totally the opposite. When I work at home, I actually find it easier to stop when I'm at home, because I know the transition is just like opening a door, and now I'm home, right? Where when in my office, there's tons of micro steps that are involved in getting home. So it's interesting that it's different for you.
Yeah. Well, also in the sense that when I was at home, I'd be like, oh, I can start working on this project at 11 p.m. I didn't have good rules of when I was working and when I wasn't.
Brendan, what about you? You work from home, don't you?
I do. Yeah. But the nature of my working from home is very different from what Karen's describing. Right. So I'll play with little stuff that I want to make sure gets mentioned. And then I'm going to shift over to what Karen's question is. Will mentioned, and this it comes up every single time, and my perspective is different. Everyone always talks about how the transition to work is helpful, right? And no one ever talks about the transition back home, or at least very few people talk about the transition back home. And that's critical. because if we are working from home and we have the kind of job where it's like, go do this, go do that, and it's very like I'm the boss or I'm in charge, or I make rapid, fast decisions and I have to be very sort of commanding, you got to be able to let go of some of that before you transition back home, because otherwise you're going to talk to your spouse and your kids in a very like demanding, bossy way. And that is not a good thing, like especially in COVID when we're all stuck in the house together. If you're sort of rubbing people the wrong way because you can do that at work, but you can't really do it at home because you need to be caring and kind, like you should be at work too, but maybe you're not. It's if you don't take time to transition back to dad or mom mode, it's gonna maybe not work as well. So pay attention to that reverse transition too. And then in terms of pros and cons, as Karen's asking it, I have like business questions, right? Like, are you planning on growing your business?
Yeah.
Like, are you looking to have more than, I guess, 2 employees at some point?
Yeah, we've been this small, honestly. If we grow, it would be adding a person because basically none of us want to manage anybody. So no, we're not going to grow. We just want to do the work.
Okay. Because one of the risks is you're not getting a clear view of what kind of an experience your employees are having day to day. If they're stressed out, you don't know unless you have phenomenal communication skills going on with your company. And if they're stressed out, even if you do have phenomenal communication skills, they might not tell you because they don't want you to think they're stressed out. They want you to think they're doing fine. And then that could slowly turn into resentment, even though you're not doing anything wrong. It's just a busy season, and the busy season turns into resentment because there's no opportunity for you to walk past them in the hallway or in the office and see how stressed they look. One of the things that we need to be aware of is all of us, when we go on Zoom, we're kind of on stage, right? Like most people coming to a Zoom meeting aren't going, hi, how's it going? Right? Like we're not like letting our guard down and being floppy and tired and our eyes aren't like glazed over. We're on for that hour or whatever. And that means that as an employer, you're not going to necessarily know how your employees are really doing. And that's a negative for working from home that you've just got to be aware of and have a method of working around it.
You know, Karen, I don't know if this is, a helpful perspective, but when earlier in my business, when I hired my first assistant, it was a virtual assistant, and I had a couple of virtual assistants over the last couple of years. And while all of my work, like that my assistant would do, technically could be done from anywhere in the world, what I discover is that I need someone that is on the other side of that wall. I'm pointing for everyone who's just listening to the podcast. Just trust me. There's a human being on the other side of the wall. I need that. I need to be able to get up and like go just quickly ask a question or say something to that person. Because it is, for me personally, when like a days that she might be taken off, I am like profoundly, like the amount of internet rabbit holes I find myself down, like it's ridiculous sometimes. Or it's like, it's sort of that, it's a form of accountability for me, having somebody else in the office who's doing work. Cause I'm like, wait, if there's somebody else doing work, I need to be doing work too. So
and honestly, that's a concern of mine, is like that kind of like peer pressure. Like sometimes if I'm stuck, like I'll go sit in the central area because then I'm like, oh, people can see me here, and then I'll focus more. You know, It's really helpful to think about. I mean, what I'm taking away from this is to think about like the transitions in and out, which has been a challenge at home, and then it's that social piece and that like ability to kind of take temperature piece. It's the interpersonal pieces. Yeah. And also then the transition pieces, because the fact is like I can set up the systems for productivity during the day wherever I am. So it's these pieces to really kind of consider and think through. So thanks a lot, you guys. It's been helpful to clarify my thinking on this.
Awesome. All right, let's do one more question before we go to break. Let's go Matt, because Matt wants to answer or ask live. All right, Matt.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's all right. How about you?
Doing pretty good. So you have a question about relationships?
Yes. I basically in relationships, from what I found, I tend to come on pretty strong. And some also feedback I've gotten is that I am too cold. And so I think what ends up happening is that I'm kind of an all or nothing type of person. And this happens in dating, work relationships, friendships, and kind of the whole gambit. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of form friendships, I realize. And yes, I know that there's kind of a pace to relationships. But I found that it's hard for me to really stay patient with that pace. And so it almost feels like I'm kind of holding back a fire hose on kind of who I am. And, eventually it just comes bursting forth, and people usually aren't ready for it. Okay. And so is there any way to kind of stay patient with that whole friendship building process?
So two things. I want to say that I think relationships are one of the hardest domains in life, in my opinion. Besides from our own sort of like neurobiology, how were relationships modeled for you kind of growing up? Because I think that informs a huge part of how we show up in relationships. So, and you don't need to respond to that because I know that can get into a personal question, but I think looking at how relationships were modeled, and if there is any elements of dysfunction in that, spending some time trying to really understand what healthy relationships really do look like, can be a really good starting point. It looks like Brendan is itching to share something.
No, I mean, relationships are kind of my jam, right? Yeah. Like this is an area of life that's not even a little bit hard for me.
Yeah, I know you do great with this. I'm always impressed with how you I know you have a lot of friends and you organize a lot of stuff in your neighborhood and yeah.
You're allowed to kind of develop a little bit of a flow chart of how you want to go into a relationship. Like that's okay. And I can share with you how I made my friend group since moving to a new town as an adult. You want to talk about hard to make friends. Hard to make friends as an adult is really, really hard. And we leveraged our kids, and we didn't start making friends until our kids were in elementary school. That's a true story. But what ended up happening was I have a few different mechanisms. One is completely inadvertent, and the other stuff was totally intentional. The inadvertent thing is right inside my house. When you walk in the door, I have a bookshelf full of graphic novels, like superhero comics, right? And I've noticed that I can tell whether I'm going to be friends with someone based on how they respond to that bookshelf, right? If they kind of give me credit for staying in touch with like my childhood stuff, we're not hanging out much later, right? And if they give me the like, oh, what's that? And have that uncomfortable, like, why do you have childhood stuff? We're not going to hang out. But if they're like, that's cool, we'll be hanging out. And if they see it and don't say anything, we'll probably be hanging out. Right? Like as long as it's a comfortable response, that's a good indication that we're probably going to be friends, which doesn't mean that I use it as like a test or anything. I've just noticed that it's there because it's there. Right.
It's become a test, even though it wasn't your intention.
Yeah, not even on purpose. Right. But it's just kind of how it is. A thing I realized eventually.
I was going to say, man, you sly bastard. That's quite the,
that's the one that wasn't on purpose. I just started to notice. Right. But some stuff that I did on purpose we have activities that are like high interest, low commitment activities, right? And the one that I most typically use is we watch movies in our backyard. Another good example of this is like a barbecue where you have a bunch of people coming, right? For like 4th of July or something. And it brings people in, right? And then we get to hang out with them a little bit. And like usually we add like, if we're trying to bring in a new family group, it's like a family group that we already have and then one other group, right? Although with COVID, it's one family at a time and that's all there is to it. The movies in the backyard are serving a different purpose now. But it used to be like we'd bring them in, high interest, low commitment, hang out, see how it goes, get the vibe, right? Bring them back again. And then eventually we'd level that up to come over and play board games. Right. And the board game is a new interaction. Now you're in my house. Things are a little closer. It's a little more interpersonal. It's a little more like I can get a vibe of your emotionality, your level of competitiveness, your level of cooperation, how well you can handle kids being noisy nearby. And what does that mean? We get a lot more information that way. And that's a different level of intimacy.
Brendan, let me ask you specifically about intimacy. Because one of the things I'm hearing is that you're not going in, starting off and sharing your like childhood secrets and all the things that like you struggle with. You're creating intimacy by sharing physical space and maybe some food
and time.
in time. Yeah. So it's a slow build, but it's centered around doing something together that you are making available. So it's like that's what you're offering in the beginning of that relationship. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. And if I'm gonna share something that like is intimate and about me, right? Like I'm struggling with my ADHD because I didn't take my meds or anything. Like I'm not sharing any of that in a vulnerable way. I'm just owning it, right? If I'm having a hard time when people come over for that barbecue because I keep forgetting to like cook something or condiments or whatever, I'm just like, yeah, I just didn't take my meds today. And most people are like, all right. Right. But people who are like, I'm like, oh, okay. If you can't handle me being like very nonchalant and off the cuff about the fact that I didn't take my meds today, long term, this isn't a plan, right? Like that's all information that I need to have. I'm filtering people out and determining whether we're going to connect well, as opposed to hoping they'll connect with me, which might be a piece of what's going on for you, Matt. You might be hoping they'll connect with you and struggling as a result.
Well, no, I really do try to connect with them too. And I do try to put forth the effort, like, okay, what's your life like? How did you grow up? Just general get to know you questions. I definitely try to reach out to them, and, likewise, I'm fine with them, asking me the same questions. It's just that it's hard to really be patient with that pace. Like I think sometimes I can know what it will feel like, know what it should feel like, but I seem to always reach a breaking point, where it's like I can't take it anymore, and so it just I come on really strong.
Any tips, Brendan?
Get the flavor of the other person, see how strong they're coming, and try to match that. Oh
yeah. That's definitely what I try to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. I know that it's a really, I think, a topic that we probably need to have more discussions around, just because it's challenging. Like making friends as an adult, like it's not easy. I know you said, Brendan, that you use your kids. I hear people say it's a great reason to have a dog. It was one of the advantages when many moons ago when I used to be a smoker, I was like fast friends for the smokers, but since I don't smoke, I lost that option.
And there's, just to beat a dead horse, there's also there's at least out in Massachusetts where there's a group called Skip the Small Talk. And I think it's national, but I'm not totally sure about that. And the idea is we're going to go hang out and talk about important stuff. We're not going to talk about the weather. Just skip the small talk. Let's jump into something. Right. So that might be something that's useful for people who like to go fast and hard. And then look at Meetup, look at Facebook events, go to events that are tied into your interests and your passions. And then you get to immediately talk about that stuff. And you're not as stuck in this world of small talk because you're at a Black Lives Matter rally and you're having these deeper, significant conversations, and that may lead to connection at a level that is closer to where he might want it.
Yeah, you need the events with social friction where you keep running into the people over and over again, rather than I'm going to see you once and we need to be friends now.
Right. Yeah. Once we start gathering together again, it's a good reason to take up the game of pickleball. I figured that Brendan and Will probably knew where I was going with that. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we have some questions about being more concise around emails, how to stop losing things, and how to finish things. I think these are questions that we could all benefit from. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Hey, everyone. The 21st season of ADHD reWired's coaching and accountability groups has just started, but we are full. But the first thing to do to become part of our next season is to join our fall interest list for the 22nd season. So go ahead and take a moment right now to go over to coachingrewired.com and click on the black button. Your email will get added to the list and you will be one of the first to get invited to our next registration event, because registration is by invitation only. And if you are new to this podcast and don't really know much about our coaching groups, first, welcome to ADHD reWired. We hope you enjoy over 300 episodes of the podcasts that are in our catalog. If an intense coaching and accountability group is what you are looking for, then join our interest list for our fall coaching season. The fall groups start October 12th and end December 18th. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the black button. By getting on the list, you'll be one of the first to receive an invitation to our registration event for our fall coaching groups. We fill up every season, so don't wait. Get your email on the list so you can be the first to receive that invitation to register for our fall coaching groups. Registration is by invitation only. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the black button. That's coachingrewired.com. Hey, do you need a break? Do you answer yes to that question and then say, now what do I do? Check out Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb this Monday and every Monday. This week, Will's episode is called Taking a Break. And you could start by taking about 15 minutes and check out his latest episode. Join Will as he explores ways that you can work with your ADHD brain to do more of the things that you want to do. Subscribe to these short, mindful ways to hack your ADHD. Go to hackingYourADHD.com for show notes and to easily subscribe. And every Friday, check out ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan. At ADHD Essentials, they help families develop the skills and knowledge needed to better manage ADHD. Go to ADHDessentials.com to learn more, and you can also learn more about Brendan's parent coaching groups. Both Hacking Your ADHD and ADHD Essentials are both part of the ADHD reWired podcast network, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. And if you are listening to this on the day it came out, there might be time to join me and the host of Hacking Your ADHD, Will Curb, and the host of ADHD Essentials, Brendan Mahan, for an hour of live Q&A, July 14th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register for this and upcoming live Q&As. Join us every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern for an hour of live Q&A. Registration is free at ADHDrewired.com/events. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. Our next live Q&A is Tuesday, July 14th. That's today, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We hope to see you there. And we are back. All right. We got a couple questions here from Audrey, but Audrey didn't say whether or not they can go live. So we'll just read those questions for you. Audrey asks, how can I write emails to be more concise? Spending 20 minutes for simple emails and drowning at work. All right. So the struggle is real. One strategy that I use to, other than just like ignoring my emails and not responding to them and hoping they go away,
that works.
Sometimes it does. No, I mean, for real. Because one, you actually don't need to respond to every email. Like people who will like email me and are wanting something, like they want my time, they want to pick my brain. When you get a lot of emails, people asking you, can I just get a little bit of time to pick your brain?
Yep.
Like, sorry, like if I could offer all that time to everyone, I would get none of my priorities worked on. All right. So a couple things. There's a website called Vocaroo. I think it's VOCAROO. I'm going to double check that. But what the website basically does, it's this very simple user interface. You record your voice, and then it creates a link. And then you can just drop that link in the email and say, thanks for your email. I recorded my response here. And you just click that link. Because in an email, people are, we try to fix our grammar and to use the right words. And if you are leaving a message, no one is expecting you to, be like an orator when you're leaving a message, right? So you get your main ideas across. And especially if you are a verbal processor, that can also be a really great way to respond. So I have done that. The other thing is there's more and more email programs are now using artificial intelligence where it's suggesting like use the suggestions. They're wonderful. Like, thank you for not making me use my brain as much. And in creating canned responses, especially if you get a lot of emails that are similar in nature, where the responses are similar in nature. Like, don't spend 20 minutes crafting the same kind of response over and over again. Like, it could be as simple as creating a Google Doc where you're, saving all of those. Or you can get a little bit more high tech, or using something like Text Expander to create a bunch of coded templates, where you drop a couple keys, you decide what those keys are going to be, and then it will expand into these templates. So those are a couple options. Brendan, what are your thoughts on this one?
Bullet points. God, bullet points.
Ooh, I like it. I like it.
Wait, it gets better.
And there's more.
If bullet points aren't going to work for you, paragraph breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Your paragraph should not be any more than 5 lines long. And that's the most they should be.
I would argue that an email should not be more than 5 lines long.
It depends on what you're doing, right? Sometimes you need a little more than that. But if we're talking about having trouble staying concise, then your emails are definitely more than 5 lines long. If you have rapid paragraph breaks, you're going to start to see how much content is filling up this email. You're going to get to see how many ideas you're talking about and how many ideas you're addressing. Every time you come up with a new idea, new paragraph. And don't worry about transition words. Just start a new paragraph. And when I say new paragraph, space, like I'll skip a line between each paragraphs. Formal business email like that, regardless of how familiar or unfamiliar you're being.
Love it. That's great. Also, voice dictation is also another great way to write. I mean, I do a lot of voice dictation with writing, because I'm a fairly fast typer, but my brain moves even faster. So my thoughts can sort of keep up more with my words than my fingers.
And if I can circle back to Vocaroo right now, because you reminded me about it, shut up fast. Right. Like if you send me a voice email and you're yammering on for more than 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, you are wasting my time. So
brilliant.
Because if I can read it, I can pull out the stuff quick, and I don't need to sit there and listen to your 30-minute voice message to find out what matters and what doesn't. I can just skip, or I can look at your email and be like, this is too long, and send you an email that's like, give me bullet points or whatever, but don't send a forever voice message.
I love that. Will, what about you?
I did just drop into the chat a link to a thing that's it's called 5 sentences. And it's just a thing you can drop into the bottom of your email that explains why all emails should be 5 sentences long. At most. It also has a 2-sentence, 3-sentence, and 4-sentence version, but it's just my biggest thing that has helped me, especially with wall of awful type of emails, is write my response in the text editor. Don't do it in my email program. Like I'll just pop open Notepad and write it there, and it doesn't matter. Like I don't need something fancy to write it, and I just need some place that's not on my actual email to respond, and it makes it much easier to respond.
Ooh, and now this one is going to be crazy. Sometimes it's faster to just pick up the phone.
Yes.
Truly. Right? I mean, I know how much we all are phone phobic these days, but what would you rather have, like a quick phone call or struggling with an email for half an hour? Right? To me, just rip the Band-Aid off, do it quickly, get it done. All right. And our second question, tips to help stop losing things constantly. All day, every hour, I'm losing things. Trying to have everything in its place, but while in use or after, I set them down and they disappear. I love this question. Okay, so if you don't have a gazillion tiles, buy them. They are amazing. I started using tile beginning last Father's Day, only because I got a 4-pack from my dad, and he didn't end up needing all of them. So because I'm tech support, and anytime he has a tech problem, he always calls me, I figure, all right, I need to actually know how to use this thing. So when he's having trouble with it, I know exactly how to help him. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have used this 5 times in the first week. I don't even think I realized how often I was misplacing things. Right. So tile, it's, look at it as you were investing in and saving time looking for things. I mean, they're You can get them on sale sometimes. You can usually get like a 4-pack for somewhere between $40 to $50. It's truly, it is worth it. Other things, when you put something down, this is something that I try to do myself, because the absolute honest good intention is you're going to come back to it. And the track record of coming back to it is really bad, right? So when we put something down with the intent to come right back to it, to put it away, right? Just recognize that like it's your brain just kind of playing a trick on you. Stop what you're doing, turn back around and go put the thing back where it needs to go. You can also just get a bunch of like mitten clips and just clip all of your belongings to your body. There's that. Brendan's responding in text because I was waiting for some kind of response from Brendan. I was like, wow, tough crowd.
There was a wall of awful question in the chat, and I felt like I should probably address that. So
Brendan, focus. We are not on the wall of awful right now. We can come to the wall of awful momentarily. We are on losing things.
Yeah, that's easy. Get a hat and don't wear it. Just put it down on a flat surface that is conveniently located and put all the little things that you lose in the hat. That has worked for me since I was in high school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
all my pocket stuff goes in my hat.
Do you have any weird tips?
You'll probably find, if you pay close enough attention, you're going to realize that you leave stuff in the same places. You probably have like 5, maybe 6 places that you leave all your stuff in. And it might be like your eyeglasses have 5 different spots and your keys have 5 different spots and your phone has 5 different spots. So you might have a total of 15, but at least you can narrow it down to where's my phone? Like for me, my phone is typically on the bookshelf outside of the bathroom, on the bookshelf outside my kids' room, on the kitchen table. Every now and then it's on the table in the den or my pocket of the pants that I just had on that I'm not wearing anymore. That's usually where they end up or where my phone ends up. And on the rare occasion, it's in my car.
Will, what about you?
I lose things a lot because I set them down in weird places. Because I'm tall, I will often be like, oh, this thing right here, I can just set it. There's nothing up here because no one uses this shelf. I can put things here. So I'll put like my phone or my wallet, my glass of water above my eye level. And then I never find it because it's above my eye level.
So not a lot that's above your eye level.
You're like what, like 6'3"? How tall are you?
6'1.5".
Oh, you seem taller. Okay,
6'2".
So one other idea too around this idea of like having a catch-all or a key hook, which are great. But what those times where we're like, okay, well we're upstairs and we didn't put it on in the catch-all or the key hook, right? So having like alternative home bases for stuff. So it's like, all right, so if it's not in the primary catch area, there's another one really close by that I can go put it in. Right. So that way you're just you're making it easier to put it in a primary space. But you also have a dedicated secondary space, for those things as well. So if it's not in the ideal place, it's easy enough to still put it in a place where you can find it. And can I recommend tile?
Oh,
and the only reason I didn't recommend tile was because you recommended tile.
Yeah. The other thing I've realized too, something that my wife tells my kids all the time is to look with their eyes. And I spend so much time not actually looking for, like, I'm like, it should be over here, but I kind of like glance over it and I don't actually see the thing I'm looking for. The other day I was looking for a notebook in my backpack. I looked at my backpack, looked elsewhere, went back, looked at my backpack, wasn't there. Finally just gave up, sat down, was like, oh, I need to write something down. Reached into my backpack and pulled it out without even looking. And I'm like,
well,
this was the most frustrating thing I've ever done.
All the time I do that kind of stuff. It's just like, I swear, like I looked so hard. It's all the time.
Reticular activating system, right? The part of your brain that is responsible for making sure that you don't notice things, because if you do, your head will explode because we're noticing so many things. Like the filter, and admittedly the ADHD version of this is not so strong, but if you're looking for something and you're convinced you're not going to find it where it actually is, your brain doesn't want you to be a liar. So your brain is going to be like, yep, it's not there. That's why it's usually the husband or the kid can open up the fridge and be like, Mom, we don't have any tomato sauce. And the mom is like, there's tomato sauce in the fridge. Just grab it out. And they're holding the door open, looking in the fridge going, there's no tomato sauce. And then mom comes over and grabs the tomato sauce that was right in front of their face the whole time. That's because their brain was like, all right, you said there's no tomato sauce. I don't have to notice that. Cool. There's milk. So don't go looking for something saying you're not going to find it, because you're just going to undermine your ability to notice it.
But one other thing that I also do, actually, I don't remember what the item was, but I did this the other day with my son. We were outside doing something, and I said to him, I'm like, listen, I'm putting this thing right here, and I'm just telling it to you because it's going to help me remember. But if I can't remember, remind me that just that whole that little brief conversation was just a way to go, brain, pay attention. This is a weird spot to put this. I probably shouldn't be putting this here right now, but I'm doing it. So I need to tell someone as a way to make that memory stickier.
I did that with my wife and a laptop, but I did it 8 months ago, and we have no idea where the laptop is.
Still?
Somewhere in my house. I lost a whole entire laptop.
How do you do that?
It's impressive.
Long story.
I think that's a good breaking point. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back, and maybe we'll find Brendan's laptop in the meantime. So we will be right back. This podcast is brought to you by our patrons over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I want to thank our 4 new patrons. I am so grateful for all of you. As this podcast is free to the listeners, it is not free to produce. I appreciate everyone who can financially support this podcast. So welcome to Michelle S. at the $5 a month level, Elizabeth S. at the $10 a month level, and Lisa P. and Matthew O., who are our newest members at the $25 a month level. Thank you so much. Consider giving at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I really do appreciate everyone's support. If you are able to support this podcast, I sincerely thank you. And for those of you who are able to give at the $25 a month level, or for those of you who are really looking for a little bit of coaching at the $25 a month level, we do a monthly coaching call, and our next call is on Tuesday, July 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So consider giving at the $25 a month level and join us. Our group coaching calls are every 4th Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you can't support this podcast financially, consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast player. All of your support is appreciated. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Patreon is Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. All right, we are back, and we have Blake, who has a question. Blake, let me just let you ask your question if you remember what it is.
I'm going to read it as my wife wrote it. So my wife and I are thinking about having kids, but she especially is really concerned about the load she will bear with me having ADHD and our kid likely having ADHD. Do you have any suggestions for ways to balance the load and general tips and tricks? I'm especially thinking about those times when I'm exhausted and my brain kind of stops functioning. This is something that happens now without kids, and with kids sounds harder, maybe.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. And even harder than you think. sorry to be the buzzkill. I'm like,
all right. So Blake, first, I'm the resource. Feel free to schedule an appointment with me. I charge $125 an hour. 2, it will be way easier to navigate this challenge once you actually have kids, because until you actually have kids, it's entirely theoretical and may or may not work. The root of it, though, is systems. Systems. The more stuff you can make automatic, the easier it will be to navigate whatever the challenges that come up. And directly connected to systems is teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. You've got to be working together. You've got to be communicating clearly with one another. You've got to be setting reasonable expectations for each other, both you and your wife. Figure out what skill set you are bringing to the table and what can become your silos. Figure out what skill sets your wife is bringing to the table and what can become her silos. And then start to learn each other's silos, but still allow whoever has the strength in the silo to be the point person on that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes. Sounds like there's also some conversations about trusting each other in their silos too.
There's a gazillion conversations to be had about that starts now and never ends.
Okay. Those have started in different contexts.
Okay.
I'm glad the kids are going to continue because so far, Elise and I have made progress.
Okay. That's good.
I think it's really helpful to hear that until we have kids, it's theoretical.
Right. And, I'm sure you will hear people say nothing can truly prepare you. And there is nothing that could be truer than that. Right. I used to do parent training before I was even a parent. And I sort of knew this too. And it's when you're a professional working with kids, it's kind of easy because you get to go home. Like I could work with your kid no matter how, challenging they are for an hour and love every minute of it. Right. But I get to go home. Like you have to take this kid home with you. When it's your kid, it's like this human being, this life is completely dependent on you for what seems like forever. But my son's going to be 9 and it is already like, wow, it's like the whole saying that the days seem long, but the years go by fast. It is true. There is things for me have had a way of sort of naturally reprioritizing themselves. Once I was a dad, it's one of these things where I say it's way harder than I imagined, and it's way better than I thought it would be too. Right? Like it's definitely the hardest job I've ever had. Right? But it's, there's a lot. I realized after, it was sometime in, my son's first year. And this is something that recurs often. But I remember feeling this the first year is that I feel like I didn't really know what joy was until I was a dad. Right. And there's something where it's like when joy can make you cry, like more than a Hallmark commercial. You guys remember Hallmark commercials? So Blake, I don't know if that's helpful. Will, what about you?
One of the things I see too is like balancing the load of work and stuff. And one thing that's really important to always keep in mind is it will never be equal, because there's no equivalence between how many poopy diapers you change and how many poopy diapers equals mowing the lawn. Like you're both doing work, but there's no exchange rate, and it's never going to be like we're doing the equal amount of work. And so a lot of times you're going to feel like you're doing a lot of work, but it's hard to see that your partner is also doing a lot of work, because there's a ton of things that we all do around our house that are invisible. Like I take out the trash is now empty, but that doesn't look like I've done anything. It's just the trash is now empty. Or, like if you clean off the counters, well, now they're clean. That looks like how they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So it's having those conversations and being very appreciative of what your spouse is doing. My wife and I say thank you for a lot of things that we do. One, to model that for the kids, to be like, hey, appreciate it. Like, I thank you for making dinner. Thank you for doing the dishes. Even though it's just great to show that sure, she doesn't need to say that, but it's nice to hear the appreciation when I do things that she is acknowledging that I've done them.
Mm-hmm. And also, like we ADHD folks, to do stuff, we kind of have to enjoy doing it at least a little tiny bit, right? That's not the truth for people who don't have ADHD. Like they can motivate themselves to do stuff that they despise and are neutral towards and all that stuff. And that's important for us to know, because it means that the stuff that your wife is doing, just because she's doing it and not complaining about it, doesn't necessarily mean she's fine with doing it. And so checking in every now and then and be like, hey, how's that activity going for you? Can I bail you out or something like that? Also, with Eric's permission, in the chat, I'm happy to drop a whole bunch of podcast episodes that might be useful, because I recently went through my podcast and pulled a bunch of episodes for the parent coaching groups that apply to each of the different themes that we address. So I have a handful that I can lay my links on right now and throw in the chat, if that's okay with Mr. Tivers, because this is his gym and I don't want to be presumptuous.
I should say no. I can't believe you would ask me to do that.
All right, so I'll throw a few things in there.
So I hope that's helpful. And the other thing that is true too, that, it's also, deciding to have a family, I think, is the hardest decision that people can make. Don't go into it lightly, right? It's, if you're someone that likes all of your freedom and doesn't like time constraints on on the things that you want to do, like, think long and hard before moving forward with that. And that's okay too. So yeah, there's so much involved in that, but, it's a really good question. And the other thing that I would say too is, sleep. As Brendan said, that systems, those systems are supported by sleep. I typically now wake up around, give or take half an hour around 7:00. Like, before I was a dad, like, I don't sleep until 10 a.m. on the weekends. No problem. Like, if I'm sleeping until 10 a.m. now, it's because I'm sicker than a dog, right? Like, so if you like sleeping in, that's over. Typically speaking. All right. Blake, I hope that was helpful.
Amazingly helpful.
Good. Awesome. All right. We have a ton of more questions and not a ton of time. I know in the past, Brendan and Will, when I go, let's do a lightning round, and we do it, and then we start like going in deep to the questions. So I'm like, could we call it lightning round and actually do that?
I didn't take my Concerta, so let's go.
I was like, that would either be good or not, depending on how your ADHD rolls. Are there any questions to you that are really popping out at you?
So many paragraphs.
I know.
Let's do the short ones.
Yep,
it's a lightning round.
Ones. All right. Nathan's a 36-year-old new to ADHD stumbled across the podcast in a deep dive for info on how to start management. Nathan, welcome. What are your recommendations for the top 5 things to do first? I think that you are doing number 1, and that is get as much information and learn as much as you can about it. Number 2, talk to your doctor and for an evaluation around medication. People will say, are you pro meds? Are you anti? I am pro trying medication, because when it works, it can be a game changer. Doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone can manage them without side effects that are tolerable, but most people can. Find a community is number 3. Number 4, limit how much you take on. I want to actually move that to number 5. I want to make number 4 exercise and self-care. Like, self-care, like, when you have ADHD, you got to figure out what are those like 1 to 3 things that around self-care that give you the biggest bang for your buck as far as like making you feel recharged. And get, I don't want to say get militant about it, but like, find your self-care stuff that works for you, and like, don't be too flexible around it. Like, when it comes to like exercise or sleep, like, those are the things that are going to make a huge difference. And it definitely helps if you leave a rating and review for ADHD reWired, ADHD Essentials, and Hacking Your ADHD. If you leave reviews for all 3, it definitely helps your ADHD management get better. I almost said the whole thing with a straight face. Do you guys have anything to add? What are your ones that I didn't mention?
Sleep. Just making sure you get really, like, that's one of my like top ones, is like almost over medication, because if it will make every other aspect of your ADHD management easier to complete.
Brendan, what about you?
Forgiveness.
You always have
ADHD
these pithy responses, or it's like, damn.
It's a lightning round, man. ADHD is nothing if not a roller coaster ride. It's nothing if not inconsistent. There are days when I'm the greatest person walking the face of the planet, and there are days when I don't know why they let me out of my house. And I have to be able to forgive myself for that. And I have to be able to forgive my kids when they struggle too, or my friends who have ADHD. And even the ones that don't. Forgiveness is critical to self-care and ADHD management.
All right, next question. How do we complete, I think it's things. There was a missing word, I think. How do we complete things? So I just want to share a quick quip. So in conversations that I have with especially with people who have ADHD, I get like one more thingitis real bad. So it's like, all right, I gotta go. And then like 20 minutes later, we're still kind of talking, right? And both parties typically are guilty of it. And so I've been doing this with a few more people recently, where it's just like permission to just hang up. So that's like in conversations. So I'm going to leave that one there because there's more I can go into, but it's lightning round. Brendan.
Man, I really wanted that to be the last question. I wanted it to be, how do you complete things? End of episode. Because that would have been amazing.
We,
cliffhanger.
With the power of editing, we can make that happen.
Define done, man. Like, find out what done means before you start doing something, and then set a boundary with whatever done is. Is it 5 minutes? Is it sending 2 emails? Like, what is done? Just define it, and then when you get there, be done.
Will
do the things that'll make finishing the thing easier. So like both of what your things make completing the task easier. Just figure out what's going to make it easier. Do that thing. That is like, oh, I can do this really easily.
And I would say continue to focus on starting, because if you don't focus on finishing, if you keep focusing on starting, one of those starts will get the finish line. All right. It's so anticlimactic now.
We want to talk about Zoom fatigue.
The rest of these are all paragraphs, guys.
Not Zoom fatigue, man.
Oh man! So I get Zoom fatigue when people ask questions in the Q&A that are paragraphs. That's the only thing that gives me Zoom fatigue. Sorry, guys. I don't know. Like I've been doing Zoom for my work for years, and so it's like this is kind of what I do. So I haven't really gotten fatigued from it. Brendan, what about you?
I think we got to look at what really, it's not Zoom fatigue. It's not. That's not what's going on. What's happening is a handful of things, is my guess. One, you're probably getting overly exposed to blue light and screen stuff. So get some blue light blocker sunglasses. That'll probably help with the eye strain that you're experiencing. Also, every time you go on Zoom, you're on. Right. And you're on not in the same way that Eric and I are on. When we're meeting with clients, it's like small stuff or we're in charge. You're on, but not doing anything half the time, because probably you have a manager and that person's on, but you're just in a meeting, bored out of your skull, sick of looking at the computer. And as a result, you're doing other stuff. You're looking at other parts of the screen. You're transitioning like crazy from the meeting over to, I don't know, Minecraft or Minesweeper. Or I don't know, maybe there's a mine cart in your office, but you're sort of zipping back and forth, and you're not staying on task with the Zoom meeting. And it's that transition fatigue that's killing you. And probably also you're not building enough time to transition out of the meeting and into the next thing. If you don't allow time to transition out of the meeting and into email or into talking to your kids or whatever it is, that's going to wear on you too, because there's all this like transition gunk stuck in your brain and in your consciousness that's not getting to come out. I don't know that it's necessarily Zoom fatigue. I think it's more transition fatigue.
I love your outside the box thinking, Brendan. I love the idea, that often in coaching, the question that somebody asks is not really the question. And so, yeah, I think that's really good.
I got a handful of clients I've been doing this stuff with recently.
All right. Well, as much as we would love to be able to answer the rest of these questions, based on my podcast analytics, nobody is listening at this point. Right. So I don't know if you all noticed, but my episodes have recently been starting to get shorter, which I've been like kind of proud about, like 45 minutes ish. Right. So, nice. This one is not one of those. We'll keep the Q&As at about an hour. But if you want deeper dives into some of your questions, one of the best ways you can do that is to join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for our Patreon coaching call, which we do once a month. It's an hour. We do it on Zoom, and we typically have anywhere between like 1 to 4 people. That's open to people who are giving at $25 a month or more. So it's a really nice way to kind of get a deep dive into any particular questions that you may have. So for everyone else, sorry we didn't have time to get to your questions. Share those questions in our Facebook community and ask the community those questions. So we appreciate all of you being here so much. We appreciate you listening. Will and Brendan, I appreciate you very much.
Appreciate you too, Eric.
And we'll catch you next month. Bye, everyone.
Toodaloo.
See you guys.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability, And if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.